into talking a little bit about the legal and political stuff, what we're doing about it, what we're doing in order to fight for an opt-out and that kind of thing, what you can do. We're going to talk about some of your options, and then we'll go into the question and answer period. Okay, so with that, let me get going. First of all, why is privacy important? The freedom to lead our lives depends on our being able to establish areas of our lives that are not monitored and controlled by others. Now, examples. If our employer can pry into all our daily living habits, it may turn out that we have to conform to the employer's dictates in order to hold on to our jobs. If an insurance company can pry into all our daily living habits, it may turn out that we are denied insurance unless we live according to its dictates. It's not too hard to imagine a future where when you sign up for insurance, they tell you, well, we'll give you this rate, but you've got to promise to work out or take care of yourself or whatever, and you get this rate. Okay? Now they're going to look at your electric usage data and say, wait a minute, your electric usage load profiles show that you didn't use the treadmill often enough. So we're going to cancel you, or we're going to raise your rates, I mean, I can see that happening. And of course, the government. If the government can pry into all our daily living habits, it may turn out that every aspect of our personal lives can be regulated and controlled. The different ways in which that's coming about are very scary. They're talking about putting black boxes in our cars that will keep track of everywhere we drive, everywhere we go. We've got the drones coming in. We've got all kinds of surveillance technology that's just growing like an octopus. And this is one element of it. Okay, there's two phases, two different ways or two different phases in which the meters are going to attack our privacy. The first one, I call that phase one. That's when they put the smart meter on your house. It could be smart electric meter, gas meter, or water meter. We're dealing with all three now. By far the worst is the electric, but the others are a cause for concern as well. All three types of meters reveal information about your private life. Water meter tells City Hall how often you're taking a shower and how often you're watering your lawn and all that kind of thing. The electric meter reveals the most, and it's I call it a gateway drug, because it leads to still further intrusion when you're forced to buy smart appliances. I don't see how we're going to avoid the smart appliances, because the manufacturers have been persuaded that that's the only kind they should make. You can only hang on to your old appliances so long. Eventually you've got to replace them. You will have smart appliances. Now, if you did not resist the smart meter, you're going to have your appliances talking to your utility and telling them everything you're doing. The utility, in turn, can turn around and sell that data. Now, they'll tell you they're not going to do that, but what they say today may have no bearing on what's actually going to happen 5 years from now. May even be different management running the company 5 years from now, from all we know. What is the data that's revealed by the smart meter? Once it's installed on your home, even before the smart appliances come, as soon as that meter's on your house, much information will be about your daily activities will be revealed to anyone who can buy the data or hack into the data that the meter generates. Okay, each appliance in your house has something that we call a signature, a unique signature. What that means is that, let's say you're running your furnace, for example. That has a signature because it's an electric motor starting up. And motors have certain characteristics. They have a certain amount of current draw. They tend to have more inrush current when they're first starting up, and then they level out. There's also the intermittent nature of a furnace, that it's constantly cycling on and off. A trained eye can look at the utility profile that the meter generates and tell you that, oh yeah, this activity was generated by the furnace. This over here, that was generated when they turned lights on. This was generated when they turned their computer on. This over here, that was generated when they started up the electric vibrator. So all of these things can be discerned from the profile graph that comes off the meter. Now, you might say, well, I mean, it would take a pretty geeky type person to be able to look at that graph and figure out what's going on. But actually, that's not going to be a problem, because there are companies already manufacturing software and selling software that will transform that geeky graph that I'm going to show you in a minute and present it in tabular form so that a lay person who knows nothing about computers can look at it and know your daily routine. Okay, the signatures of appliances that enable them to extract all this information is the amount of current a particular appliance draws, the duration of the draw, the startup or inrush current, whether the current is drawn in step with the voltage or lags behind, and whether there's a regular pattern of on and off cycles. Okay, this is what the load profile looks like. This would be like the raw data coming off of your meter. Okay, the only thing that's not raw here is that labels have been put in that say things like refrigerator, kettle, toaster. Those have been added. You take all those labels out, and what's left is the raw data, straight off the meter. Now, I will admit that this particular graph was based on very granular data from a meter. This particular meter was sampling your usage every minute. So it got a separate reading for each minute of the day. Now, the companies, utilities now are not talking about making it that fine, that granular. They're talking about once an hour. DTE, or on my side of the state, says once an hour, unless you sign up for a special program, then it's every 15 minutes. I think consumers are saying once an hour, and they're going to transmit it 6 times a day. Maybe later on, Mr. McGee can comment on that.
Thanks.
But the point is, there's nothing to change this. Once that meter's on your house, the utility can change its mind at any point, send radio signals to your meter that will begin to gather the data in finer time increments. So they could approach this. They could approach capturing your data every minute if they wanted to. If they did, they could create a picture like this. Over on the left, you see some little blips down there, 3 or 4 little blips, and it says refrigerator, okay? Then you come along a little further, and there's a little higher blip, and that's where somebody turned on the electric burner on the stove to warm up a tea kettle or something. And there's a high blip that says toaster. That draws more current, and only briefly for, maybe 20, 30 seconds, or however long it takes to make a piece of toast. So by the brevity of it and the intensity of it, how high the peak is, you can tell that's a toaster. Then following that, washing machine, about half as high, and you get periodic cycles over a period of, anywhere from 15 minutes to half an hour, whatever. And other things can be identified. The really high peaks are when an electric oven is cycling on and off, or electric heaters. So that's the kind of information a load profile can provide. And this is before you get smart appliances. Okay, the utility, we know they can change the recording interval. Now they say you'll take a separate reading for each hour. Those can be stored in the meter's memory. So even though they're only sending the information out 6 times a day, they're sending the readings out 6 times a day. As Diana pointed out, there's a lot of other signals that are going to be going on constantly, but the actual meter readings may only go out 6 times a day. But when a reading goes out, it will have the separate amounts for each hour in that transmission. These meters are remotely programmable. They can change the recording times at any time, with or without notice to the homeowner. Okay, software, I was alluding to this a minute ago. There is software in the market already. It's being sold in California. Companies are signing up. They had a bidding or an auction or something to bid for the right to buy that data. California law allows utilities to sell the data. We have no law in Michigan that I'm aware of that prevents the utility from selling the data, even though our utilities keep promising us that they will not sell it. But they are selling it in California, and the software is on the market that can take that data and present it not as a raw graph, like that, The people that buy the information, they don't want to see something like that geeky. That what they want to see is tables and chart in tabular form that says the routine of this household is they usually get up at whatever time, and they're off to work by such and such a time. So if you want to do telemarketing, these are the ideal times when you should call them. That's the kind of thing they're going to pull out. But insurance companies may want somewhat different kind of information, because they may want to check on how healthy your lifestyle is. You might want to know, for instance, are you getting enough hours of sleep every night? You know, do you think they're entitled to know that? Is that the world we're living in now, that they should know how many hours of sleep you get every night? And how often you use the treadmill? Okay, so this is consumer profiling. If you look at this graph again, if you study it, you can figure out when is this customer sleeping. Okay? Anybody, if you think you know where on this time, this is time horizontally. Starting with 0 hours, and then 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, all the way over to 24 hours on the right. How many people think they can tell when the homeowner is sleeping from this chart? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of you. Okay, let me spell it out. Okay, the first roughly 7 or 8 hours of that chart, starting from the left end, those are the sleeping hours, because all you see going on there is the refrigerator, little blips of the refrigerator. That's an automatic thing. Refrigerator turns on and off in order to maintain a certain temperature in the refrigerator. There's no other electrical activity going on in the house. So we know those are sleeping hours. So we know when they wake up. Okay. We know when they make breakfast. We know when they do their laundry, and so forth. So are they getting enough sleep? Is there more than one refrigerator in this house? You could tell that. If there was 2 refrigerators, you'd see a different pattern. Is there more than one stove? Is there more than one washing machine? Could it be there's more than one family living in this house? You could probably figure that out too. Now, who would want this? Well, insurance companies, employers, marketing companies, police. Police might want to know if you were home at the time of the crime. Maybe you have an alibi and you say you were one place and they find out you weren't there, or you were someplace else based on this kind of data. Again, Fourth Amendment, they're not supposed to be able to reach into your home and know what you're doing, or when you're awake, or when you're there or not there, but they can with this. Now, there comes the second phase of the privacy assault. Once those smart meters are in your home, and I don't know how you're going to avoid them, actually, that will give the utility the ability to know exactly which appliances you're running when, and it will give them the ability to, in effect, turn off individual appliances. This is part of balancing, this is part of rationing. It's part of balancing the electrical load to match the available supply of electricity. They don't want to keep on building more power plants, so they're going to begin to try to control you in various ways how you use electricity. So one of the things that they could do is they could simply turn off your air conditioning, your washing machine, your dishwasher. Any of those major appliances that have major draws could be turned off during peak load if they feel they need to do that in order to keep the demand down to the available supply of electricity. Now, they will sell these programs in the beginning as voluntary programs. They'll say, if you sign up for such and such a program, we'll give you a lower rate for your electricity. Fine. So they said, that sounds good. But eventually, this may well become a mandatory program. All of the necessary technology and infrastructure will be in place. They can turn it into a mandatory program. Or maybe the utility doesn't want to make it mandatory, but the government will order the utility to make it mandatory. Okay. Now, here's another thing. There are such a thing as federal privacy guidelines. These were developed by the National Institute for Standards and Technology, otherwise known as NIST, N-I-S-T. They formed a working group to study and recommend appropriate standards for protecting people's privacy within a smart grid system. This working group was called the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel Cybersecurity Working Group. They issued a report in August of 2010. Now, what were some of their key recommendations? First of all, choice and consent. They say an organization, and by an organization here they mean typically a utility, although maybe could be other kinds of organizations too, but an organization should clearly, fully, and accurately describe the choices that are available to individuals. And to the extent practicable, obtain explicit approval for the collection and use of personal information. Consumers should have the option to forego data collection and services that are not related to the core services provided by the organization. Well, what are the core services of a utility? It's to provide you with electric energy. The core service is to give you energy and to bill you for it once a month. Those are the core services. Why do they need to be collecting all this information again? And according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they should be giving you a choice whether you want to opt into that or not. It should be voluntary. Now, what can you do about all this? You say, well, you know, we're helpless. What can we do? Well, first of all, first thing you want to do is inform your utility with a certified letter that you do not consent to the installation of a smart meter in your home. I would highly recommend that as the first step. Second step, put a sign next to your meter to inform the installer you do not consent to such installation. Otherwise, it could be an installer comes out and he doesn't know you wrote a letter to the company. He may be a contract worker rather than a direct employee of the utility. That's what we have on the east side of the state. I don't know if Consumers is using contractors. Maybe Mr. McGee can comment on that later. If you haven't had one installed yet, we recommend you lock the meter housing. Most meter housings have a hasp where a padlock could be put through it. If you have that type of meter housing, we recommend you padlock it. Now, it's true the installers can cut through a padlock if they choose to do so. We've known that to happen in a few cases, but in most cases that's enough to discourage them and they go away. If the meter's already been installed, demand it be removed. Now, here I have to tell you a story. I'm working with two families over on the east side of the state where they developed very severe health issues soon after smart meter was installed. The wife was not able to sleep at night. She was having nausea, all kinds of problems. Every time she would leave that house and go visit somebody for a few days, her symptoms would clear up. She came back to the house, symptoms returned. Now, this is not placebo factor, psychosomatic. She did not even know there was a smart meter on the house until later. All she knew was that at a certain time, a certain month, she started having frequent symptoms like this, and when she left the house, they went away. After this had been going on a few months, some neighbor told her, hey, did you look? Maybe they put a smart meter on your house. She didn't even know it was there. She couldn't connect cause and effect. She couldn't create imaginary symptoms in her mind because she didn't even know it was there. So when she found out it was the smart meter and she began to put two and two together and connect the dots, she called the utility, Detroit Edison, and pleaded with them to take the meter off the house. She even had a letter from her doctor where the medical doctor advised that she should not have a smart meter in her home. She sent that in. The utility would do nothing for her. Now, I want to say at this point, it is my impression that this kind of rough treatment that we've seen from Detroit Edison, you're not seeing that kind of rough treatment on this side. From what I understand, Consumers Energy has been much more sensitive about dealing with complaints and has in fact agreed to remove meters in some cases where they're creating problems. So they deserve credit for that. But they are just as arrogant as all get out on my side of the state. They force the installations. They will not take them off. Now what happened, so this couple, they got nowhere. It had become a serious threat to the wife's health, and it was also deemed to be a Fourth Amendment violation of privacy invasion. Finally, on advice of others, they sent a letter to the utility giving them 21 days to remove the meter. They said in their letter, if you do not remove the meter in 21 days, we will remove the meter. And they went, 21 days went by, they got a letter from the utility that said, we disagree with everything you said, and we're not taking the meter off the house. So they had bought an analog meter through the internet. They took the smart meter off, they put the analog meter in. They duly recorded all the meter readings, and they safely packed and shipped the smart meter, sent it back to the utility. 2 weeks later, they were served with a lawsuit. Detroit Edison sued this couple. Another couple. This one was the first couple was in Addison Township, Michigan, in Oakland County. Second, another couple, Farmington Hills, Michigan, same thing. Went through the same process, pleaded with the utility, sent them the 21-day letter. No dice, won't take it off the house. They also bought a meter through the internet and replaced it. Now I know of a third situation where this is a woman who was sleeping in a tent in her backyard until it got too cold this fall. She went through that process. She bought a meter and replaced it. Is this a good thing to do? Well, there's several things to consider. First of all, replacing a meter is not rocket science on the one hand. On the other hand, there are some pitfalls. There are some risks. If you don't do it correctly, you can create problems. You could shock yourself. You could not get the meter seated right and create arcing, which could lead to a fire. Various things could happen. So if you're going to do this, get a qualified person to do it for you. If you don't know anything about electricity, don't attempt it yourself. Get a qualified electrician to do the work for you. And of course, consult an attorney to see the legal ramifications. First two couples are currently being sued. These cases are in Oakland County Circuit Court. First thing Detroit Edison did was try to get an immediate injunction against the couple and a declaratory judgment. The judge refused to give them that. The judge said Detroit Edison hadn't made its case sufficiently, and it was put on the docket for trial. It's going to come to trial next summer. Same thing with the second case. So you got to know if you do this, though, that there's a real possibility you will be sued. Okay.
Meanwhile, are they using those meters?
Yes. The company, the couples have denied access to the property for purposes of reinstalling the smart meter. So their meter stays on the house. The smart meter did not get reinstalled, and their electric service was not terminated. Okay, that's the end of the privacy presentation. So the other thing is that, just to speak briefly, let's see, how's it? I'm going. Okay. The other thing is that a bunch of us are doing all we can to fight this thing. There's quite a number of us, mostly over in southeastern Michigan, but we're trying to get some of you folks interested and involved. We did do a meeting similar to this in Holland last August, although the turnout tonight is much higher than what we got in Holland. And we may do other meetings. But the goal, first of all, we were able to get 24 units of local government. That's 22 city governments and 2 county governments to back us. All of these governments passed resolutions. They have no authority. We wish they could pass an ordinance that says no smart meters in our city or no smart meters in our county. They can't do that because the state legislature has given exclusive authority to the Michigan Public Service Commission to regulate utilities throughout the state. Our experience dealing with the Michigan Public Service Commission is that they are not on our side. They have entrenched attitudes that are very much pro-utility. When I first complained to them, when my friend Joan got a letter about her house, and we called them, the Public Service Commission said, "Can you help us with this?" They said, "No." And I said, "Well, have you given Detroit Edison permission to install these smart meters?" The answer I got was, "They don't need our permission to install smart meters. We don't interfere with the utilities business practices," quote unquote. That's an exact quote. That quote was repeated again to other people who contacted them later. It is their mantra. We do not interfere with the utilities business practices. My answer is, well, why are we paying your salary? Wasn't your agency created precisely to control utilities business practices, among other things. You read the statute. This agency was created back in the 30s. It was created to regulate the rates, the prices that would be charged for electricity, but also the terms and conditions of service and the quality of service. All of these things are within its purview. Yet the Michigan Public Service Commission has chosen to interpret its mandate only to control rates. They do general rate hearings about once a year for each utility. They set the rates the utility can charge to recover its capital investments. They tend not to get into other areas unless you really push them. Now, that was their attitude initially, but after 9 city governments passed resolutions, they changed their tune. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I talking close enough to the mic? Let me do a little better here. Okay. They changed their tune. After 9 city resolutions said, we think the Michigan Public Service Commission needs to look into this, investigate the health, and we think the Michigan Public Service Commission needs to provide an opt-out for those who object. Every city said that. Half the cities at least said there should have been a moratorium, that they should cease and desist any more installations until a proper investigation of the health effects had been completed. Okay, the Public Service Commission opened the investigation in January 2012, ran 6 months, culminated in a report June 29th saying we deem the health effects to be inconsequential, was their word. And they basically just pussyfooted around the privacy issue. They didn't say there's anything wrong with collecting the data, but they said, you know, the utilities should be careful to how they treat the data, how they keep it confidential, and they encrypt the transmission so that hackers can't eavesdrop and so forth and so on. They did say, however, that there should be opt-outs. That was one good thing we got out of that 6-month investigation. The Commission determined that every utility in Michigan that's going to have a smart meter program must offer an opt-out. That is now mandated. So they leave it up to utilities to come up with a specific proposal. They say opt-out should be on a cost of service principles, they say. What that means is if it's going to cost the utility extra money to take care of people who don't want smart meters, then the people who don't want smart meters should pay extra money to cover those extra costs. Well, it sounds sort of reasonable on the face of it until you look deeper. What that means, for example, they have to continue sending meter readers around to read the analog meters of the people who won't have the smart meters. Okay, that's a cost. Maybe the people opting out should pay that cost. That's what the Commission is saying. Okay, so Detroit Edison came up with a proposal, and Consumers has one too. I'm more familiar with Detroit Edison's. They said people should pay $87 up front to start opting out. If they, okay, that's to change the meter out apparently. They can send somebody out to pull the smart meter off the house and put a different kind of meter back on the house. So that $87 upfront charge. And then pay $15 a month forever. Or until next year when they decide that 15 isn't enough and it ought to be 22 or whatever, you know. So it's a perpetual charge. It's very significant for a lot of folks. That means $180 a year. The first year would be $267, and then $180 a year thereafter, or until they increase it. That's a lot of money to opt out. It will be enough to discourage most folks, which we think is exactly the intention. We think the purpose of these charges is not so much to recoup these costs as it is to penalize and discourage people from opting out because they want everybody in the program. So we are fighting this. Okay, we just went through a series of hearings in Lansing on Detroit Edison's proposal. And I was up there along with a number of people in our group. We had 9 interveners that registered to intervene in this proceeding, and they were up there testifying, cross-examining Detroit Edison's witness and the witness for the Public Service Commission. And there's going to be a decision coming down on this in May, on this one. And my understanding is Consumers has also made a similar proposal for slightly lower amounts. I think it's $60-some up front and $12 a month or something like that. And they're going to handle that as part of a general rate case rather than having a separate proceeding just to deal with that. What we say is First of all, the problem with the proposal that Detroit Edison has, they're not even going to let people have analog meters. They're not going to let them keep them if they've still got them. They're not going to let them have them back. What they're proposing is everybody will get a smart meter, even though that was the thing that created all the furor in the first place, and it caused 24 city governments to say no. Yet, they're going to make everybody have a smart meter. The only difference is, if you, in the opt-out program, they will turn off the radio transmitter. Well, as I tried to show earlier, and I know that Diana covered in her presentation, when you turn off the radio transmitter, that only takes care of half the problem. The other half is that dirty electricity, those harmonics. When I showed the slide with the 60 cycle in green and all the little red noise superimposed, that's the dirty electricity. You're still going to get that. If you've got a smart meter with the radio transmitter turned off, you still get that noise. And we've seen a lot of evidence that that kind of noise is what causes malfunctions in medical equipment and causes some of the health symptoms that are being reported by electrosensitive people. So we say that's not acceptable. You can't make people take a smart meter with the radio turned off. You have to, if they're going to opt out, then they should be able to have an analog meter. They should be able to keep it if they still got it, or get it back if they're in the opt-out program. The other thing is, we say there shouldn't be any opt-out fees. How can you charge people fees to exercise a constitutional right? It's the Fourth Amendment issue. Should you pay a fee to defend your Fourth Amendment from privacy intrusion? There's a Fifth Amendment issue here. It's the everybody's Fifth Amendment, you think about the, people pleading the Fifth because they don't want to incriminate themselves. But there's a lot more to the Fifth Amendment. There's a takings clause, also sometimes known as the eminent domain clause, which says the government cannot take your property without just compensation. Well, this is a taking. We see this as a taking. They're taking people's health. They're affecting the value of their property. They thought they had a home where they could live comfortably. All of a sudden, they can't sleep in their own home. That's a taking under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. You cannot charge people a fee to avoid a taking. We think that fees, any kind of fee, is unconstitutional. Consumers is also proposing fees, as I mentioned. We think that's wrong. However, so we're fighting to keep analog meters, we're fighting to not have fees. But however, if they're going to have fees, we think they could be a lot more reasonable. Mr. Erickson, representing the State Attorney General's office, cross-examined the witness for Detroit Edison, and he says, why are you insisting, because half their customers still have the analog meters, he says, why are you insisting on sending somebody out to take that analog meter off the house and put on a smart meter that doesn't transmit, that has its radio turned on? So what do you gain from it? Do you get any more information from that than you would get by just letting them keep the analog meter? The witness was obliged to admit under cross-examination that there was no advantage to that. And so therefore, the Attorney General has filed a brief now stating that people should simply be allowed to keep their analog meters. If they're opting out, they should be allowed to keep their analog meters. Therefore, the $87 charge up front is not supported. $62 of that was the cost to send a man out to put a meter on that people didn't want in the first place. The Attorney General says that's not warranted. So at most there would be maybe a $20 upfront charge under his reasoning. The other thing is the monthly cost. The $15 a month that they want to charge, or in consumers' case $12 a month, most of that is for the monthly meter readings. Now, the witness from Detroit Edison was asked under cross-examination, why do you have to keep on reading the meters once a month? There's already a regulation, a state regulation that says people can read their own meters and report the results. And the witness says, well, because we want to read them every month. Basically, that's what he said. We want to do it every month. There's nothing in the regulation that says we can't do it every month. So we want to do it every month. Therefore, we're going to charge $15 a month so we can keep on. Because this is not mass meter reading anymore. What they're doing now, as long as everybody had analog meters, it was cheap to read the meters. They figured out it only cost about 45 cents per meter to get a meter read every month. Because they go from house to house to house, they just work their way down the street, and it only takes a few minutes per house, and they figured it cost 45 cents a meter to get those readings. Well, now, There's not going to be any mass readings anymore. They figure only a small percentage of the population is going to opt out, and they're going to have to do what they call special meter readings. This means that they have to specially send somebody out to isolated locations here and over there and over there, and they're not all going to be in the same neighborhood or the same street. They're going to be scattered, helter-skelter. They're going to have to send people out to get these individual reads. Now they say it's going to cost us $8 per reading instead of 45 cents a reading. Well, given that, and given that people can read their own meters and report their own meters, what is the justification to charge $8 a month for reading meters? None. I mean, they could send somebody out to audit. They think you're cheating when you self-report. They could send somebody out to audit you once or twice a year. They also can go on whether your readings you're reporting are consistent with prior year's usage. It's a pretty good idea if you're reporting straightforward or not. And if you're under-reporting, they'll catch you when they send somebody out to do an audit. That's our position. They don't need to come out every month. It made sense when the cost to do a reading was 45 cents a reading. It made sense to read every meter every month. At $8 a read, doesn't make sense anymore. That's our position. So where are we? We would hope that the Michigan Public Service Commission would agree with us and will let people keep analog meters and charge no opt-out fees. We don't think that's going to really happen. That's our wish, but it won't happen. The Public Service Commission has shown us again and again and again they side with the utilities. We think they will approve the utilities proposal, maybe with a few tweaks. They may adjust the amount of the initial fee and the monthly fee, but they're going to be fees. We suspect that they will go along with the proposal that it must be a smart meter with the radio turned off and not an analog meter. So the battle won't be over in May. That'll only be one milestone. Then where do we go? Then we have to appeal that decision to the Michigan Court of Appeals. And we have to continue to keep up the pressure politically through city councils, county governments. Am I getting hurt in the back? Am I coming through okay? We have to keep up the political pressure. Now, what I would like to see, or would hope some of you would take away from this meeting, is why don't some of you form a local group? We have local groups in several different cities already on the east side. I'd like to see you guys get something started over here. That's one of the reasons we're having you sign up for the mailing list. If somebody's willing to take the ball and organize it, we'll make the mailing list available to that person so that they can contact you and see if some of you are willing to come together for an organizational meeting so you can get a group started here. Well, what would be the purpose of such a group? Go to your Muskegon City Council. Make the case that the Muskegon City Council should pass a resolution. Now, the type of resolution you want to be a little different than the 24 that we did in the past. One you want should plead with the Public Service Commission to allow analog meters and to allow opt-outs with no fees. Those are the two things you want to ask for. So if there's people in this room that would like to get something like that started, maybe somebody can see me after the meeting, or we'll try to find a way to get the information to you so you could send emails out to the people that were at the meeting and see who's interested. Okay, that would be the goal. Finally, again, and I'm just about wrapping up on this and we'll go into questions and answers in just a minute. Finally, again, I would encourage you, I think in this side of the state, you probably will not have to resort to self-help to change your own meter, because my understanding, and Mr. McKee maybe will comment on this, is that consumers' policy has been that they will take the meter off if you really want to take it off the house. They will do that, I believe. So I think you won't have to do the desperate measures that we're doing on the other side of the state. But should the situation arise that you can't get the meter off the house, I would encourage you to consider self-help. With the caveats, use a qualified electrician and get some legal advice before you do it. That's the end of my talk. Now, we can now be glad to entertain questions. until they chase us out. I think we've got half an hour.
Mr.
Be sure
Sheldon, may
people
I
have signed up.
Just a few minutes, and then we
Yeah,
can
a few, yeah.
David,
Q&A? All right.
make sure everybody has signed in. Anybody
Yeah,
who
another
neglected to
thing.
sign in coming in?
We got this, we got a sign-up list here on the clipboard.
There's a microphone.
We got a couple
Microphone,
pages, of course, if you signed up
microphone.
already, but if you haven't signed, this would be a good time to do it.
Can I make a statement before he goes up?
Yeah.
Just real quick, I realize that we're going for the opt-out, but there's a couple other things that we need to consider. These radio frequency collectors, some of these meters on people's houses actually are collecting from multiple houses. So you might have a meter on your house that's actually collecting 100 other meters' data.
Not on this side of the
Okay.
side. That's mesh network.
Okay.
That's what we have in West Bloomfield.
Sir, why don't we let Mr. McKee speak for a few minutes? Is that right?
All right. Wow, thank you all. I wasn't that uncomfortable sitting there. I'll just say a few things. First and foremost, I am Consumers Energy. I work for Consumers Energy, not the government. Consumers Energy is a 126-year-old independent, investor-owned company. We're not the government. The reason that we're installing smart meters is because they provide customer value. There are a lot of services, a lot of programs that a lot of people actually are looking forward to. Some people are actually even enthusiastic about. Let me explain what some of those are real quickly. Just to give you a little bit of balance or logic as to why we might do what we're doing for customers. The first part that I need to mention is that smart meters, the meters that we're installing, measure aggregate load, total load, just like the meters that you have in your house right now. We can't tell how you're using your electricity. We can't tell where you're using your electricity. We can't tell if you're using it on a treadmill or a dishwasher. That is the aggregate load that gets sent to us for billing purposes. One of the biggest reasons why we are embracing the technology and utilizing the technology to provide more customer value to our customers is that we don't know right now when our customers are out of power unless they call us on the telephone. How many of you own smartphones? How many of you have smartphones? How many? How many? How many people consider yourselves computer savvy? A few more? All right. Not a lot of smartphone folks out there, not a lot of computer users out there. This information, this aggregate information is provided for billing purposes. We don't know that you're out of power, our customers are out of power if a tree falls on the line. In this day and age, in the information age, we don't know unless somebody picks up the phone and calls us and says that they're out of power. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way.
Give me a break.
So right now, if you're home in your subdivision, if you're in your subdivision, and there are 20 people who live in the subdivision, 20 houses, and one person is home at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they call us and say they're out, we're going to send one truck. But maybe we should send 4
Did you
or 5.
see the health dangers?
Maybe we should see 4 or 5. I didn't speak during anybody else's presentation, and you're very kind. So that's the logic behind what we're doing and why we're doing it. Let me get into some of the programs. And again, this is encrypted data. This is information that we're going to collect for billing purposes, and then we're going to take that information, we're going to format it and put it on a secure website for our customers to access. Nobody else, for individual customers, so they can pull up the web page, take a look at how they're using their electricity, create a little profile for themselves compared to another house that has 3 bedrooms, is 2,000 square feet, that sort of thing, and our customers can then compare their energy use to a typical home, same size, and then they can follow the pointers if they want to. They don't have to do any of this if they don't want to. Follow the pointers on the web page to determine whether or not they want to follow any of those to reduce their use, to save money, and avoid wasted energy. So those are some of the reasons. Some of the programs were talked about. With smart meters, some of the programs would be select your bill date. Right now you pay your bill, or you get billed for, what is it, Roger, 17 days after reading? Yeah, something like that. So now with the smart meters, because we're collecting that data, our customers can choose when they want to pay the bill. So they can choose a date that is convenient for them. since we won't be sending out a meter reader. Air conditioning cycling, there was some chat about interrupting the service, interrupting electricity to a person's home. If a person chooses to participate in a program where they want to pay a lower rate of electricity during the entire year so that their air conditioning could be interrupted, if they've enrolled in that program, and only if they've enrolled in that program, on peak days when electricity is more expensive or we've got higher demand for electricity, that is a program that's out there. Same thing with dynamic pricing. People are Mr. Sheldon talked about higher costs at various times. Right now, the state of Michigan is a 25% importer of electricity on hot summer days. We don't have enough electricity in the state. We import it all the time. We get it from Canada and other states. It costs us more for that electricity. It's a higher rate electricity when we go into the spot market to get it, and you're already paying that. Everybody already pays it. It's already averaged out in your electric rates every month throughout the entire year. Through dynamic pricing, if a person enrolls in the program, if they want to, then they can be notified so that they'll know when the prices are higher or lower so they can avoid those higher cost times with some of the discretionary use items, loading the dishwasher, running laundry. They can avoid those times. So if it's August 5th and it's 100 degrees outside and it's 2 in the afternoon, they may see, oh, it'll cost me a lot more to do my laundry now than if I wait until it cools off tonight. There are other scenarios too. Those are the primary programs that we're looking at. Finally, electric and magnetic fields and RF. There's so much information there between what's a microwave and what's a radio frequency. Since Marconi invented the radio 100 years ago, Tesla? I thought Marconi.
Tesla, come on.
Marconi with the radio. Tesla.
Marconi got the credit. Tesla.
So since the invention of the radio, there's been lots of research done, 90 years worth of research done, and I understand that there's some information out there that would make people concerned, but there's also just as many studies that have been done by Lawrence Livermore Laboratories, by National Institutes of Health, lots of credible institutions that have come to the conclusion that radio frequencies at the levels coming from smart meters do not present a health threat. So that's why Consumers Energy can move forward with this, because number one, because we're providing customer service. We're providing a product to our customers and trying to improve it. A lot of people embrace technology and they want to utilize those smartphones. They want to use their computer access. They want to have access to appliances somewhere down the road that we don't even have programs for. They want to be able to control that. They embrace that. Not everybody does. And so we have in our, and you folks might be part of that, 1.33% is what we've got right now, folks who are rejecting the smart meters. And you would be part of those folks.
We don't know.
And we have right in our brochure a number to call if people want to request to maintain a meter other than a smart meter. That number is 1-888-862-2199.
Can you reach somebody?
There's a whole, absolutely, there's a whole stack of these brochures right there. And to get more information about smart meters, that's the number to call. So, thanks for giving me a couple of minutes.
I'd like to give you a quick
Yeah, absolutely. If Mr. Sheldon doesn't mind, if Jim doesn't mind.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Since we already have a power energy shortage in this state and we purchase energy from other sources, why in the hell are you closing down the Muskegon plant?
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with the carbon emissions. Jim mentioned earlier it had to do with carbon regulations. It has nothing to do with those. It has to do with other emissions from the plant. And right now, that plant complies with every regulation to meet public health and safety standards.
Because they're not part of GE.
No, it's because it's an older plant, and to install the equipment to meet the new standards in 2015, we just can't justify the expense. So we're looking at building a gas-fired plant on the other side of the state. Natural gas is where a lot of utility companies are going. So that generation will have to be replaced at some point. And right now, natural gas is the way to go. It's more competitive than coal.
In regards to the meters, are those manufactured in China?
That's a GE meter. It is
Manufactured.
assembled in the United States. Like many products, there are parts of it that come from around the world. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just have a comment. My privacy and most of all my health are much more important than the inconvenience of a few hours of a power outage, and definitely more important than selecting my own building. I just want to.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're open for questions now. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to ask him, I was at a meeting, he
Yeah.
says they won't know how much we're using for you. I was at another meeting, consumers
Yeah.
there. I asked the question about this. If they control this, I says, then you have the right to come into my home and say, I'm using too much electricity, therefore you need to maybe buy a new refrigerator, which you'd probably tell me that, as old as mine is. The answer was this moment of silence, and the gentleman from Consumers said, well, we could, but we won't do that.
Yeah, well, he should have chosen his words better. I will say this, we've got an appliance rebate program. We'll give you $50 for that old refrigerator if you put in something that's a little more energy efficient. That's smart, it doesn't matter.
Ma'am,
It's
the
just
red
getting rid of the
shirt.
old one.
Red shirt.
You said that you were only going to take an aggregate.
Yeah.
So then what good is it going to do me to compare my aggregate to another?
That's right, there are some limitations. There are some
So
limitations.
what good is it going to do?
Well, that's why you create the profile of your home, compare it to another home, and you see that maybe you're using 20-25% more electricity, then you can look at where could that electricity be going, and then just follow those pointers. It's not specific to your appliances.
How do I create a profile if all you're getting?
You'll see. You'll see. All I can say is you'll see this summer. That's when it will be available. It won't be available until then.
Okay, we need to keep moving along here. I'm sure I can see there's a lot of people want to ask questions. I saw a hand up over here. Sir?
Well, at Consumers Power, I called up and asked about the energy audit, and
Yeah.
they said that they don't do them only 30 miles out of Grand Rapids.
Where do you live?
So I live in the north end of the county.
North end of Muskegon?
Yeah.
All right. Give me a call.
They wouldn't help me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll look into that. Give me a call. I'll look into it.
Okay, who else we got? A man back there in the corner?
Are the meters UL approved?
No, actually, there's something in the law apparently that the utility companies are not required to have their meters UL approved. That's my understanding. I'm sorry, I should talk to the mic. Apparently, the utilities are not required to have the meters UL approved. Everything else connected, electrical connected with your house has to be UL approved, but not the meters.
How'd they get a variance on that?
I don't know how they got a variance. Yes, sir.
I just want to apologize to him for butting into him. And also, you know, you're talking about the opt-out program, but the real situation here is not necessarily the smart meters. It's these antennas that are on top of the poles that are radiating the entire neighborhood.
Are you talking about the cell phone towers?
I'm talking about the radio frequency. I'm talking about the smart meter.
Okay, this is not the consumer's technology.
I see.
Okay, this is not the consumer's technology. That's how they're doing it over on the east side of the state. They have a mesh system. Meter talks to the neighbor's meter, daisy chain down a line. The last meter is called the collector, and it sends it up to a pole. Okay, this is not their system. Consumers is having a direct signal from each meter to the nearest cell phone tower. Okay, so what is it you're concerned about then?
Well, I mean, I wasn't aware of that, and so like for us on the east side, I drove all the way from Metro Detroit for this, but
Oh, thank you, sir.
for us, I mean, even if I take the thing off my house, my neighbor's meter is still there, and I'm right behind an antenna that's radiating 5 square miles of radiation.
That's true.
It doesn't even matter if you take the smart meter off.
That's true. You raise a valid point, and here's the thing. Even if they establish this opt-out plan that they're talking about, and even if they let you keep your analog meter, your problem is you're still being bathed in electromagnetic radiation from all the other smart meters. You got it off your house, but you may have a neighbor whose electric meter is closer to your bedroom than your own meter is. And there's the aggregate effect of all the meters, and the cell phone towers too, of course, that they're communicating with. Yes, sir. The gentleman in the back that held up the paper, yeah.
I want to rebut that for a minute.
This is, by the way, I'm sorry, this is Ken Tyler from Consumers Energy. Just,
Okay.
radio frequency guy.
Make it a quick point, but go ahead, sir.
I've been doing radio for 26 years, and the system that you're talking about over in Detroit is not what consumers are using. That's a mesh technology. We're using a point-to-point directly from the meter to a cell tower. I know what you're talking about. It is entirely different. You're using higher power radios. You're using collectors. They're not the same as what we're using. Now,
Okay, sir.
What I wanted to rebut here is that they did a very good job of scaring people. And I want to talk about radio frequencies for a minute. All kinds of radio waves. There's gamma rays that come from outer space, from sun. There's X-rays. There's visible light. There's infrared light. There is regular radio waves like TV rays, TV waves, and cell phone waves. The first two are called ionizing radiation, and those are the ones that, when she talked about
sir,
changing DNA.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but here's the thing. Let me make a suggestion to the two gentlemen from Consumers. I think it would be an excellent idea if Consumers would put on a meeting.
We've had 90. We've had 90 meetings. 90. We've had 90 meetings in townships and cities and all over the place.
Okay, you have, let me just...
But this is your meeting. I didn't want us to interrupt. This is your meeting.
You're exactly correct, sir.
I wanted to...
We paid for the room.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of questions and answers, which I've already done. You've been very gracious. Thank you very much for giving me just a moment.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let me go back to the gentleman that had his hand up, that was holding the paper up in the back there by the glass.
I want to know, is it at all possible that the illness that my wife has been going through for the last 3 months could be coming from a meter that's right on our bedroom wall?
I would hope not, sir. I wouldn't think so.
Next question, sir.
Yeah, you've been with Consumers over 10 years.
Me? Yeah, 20 years.
Were you part of the 4,000 people that had their Social Security numbers stolen as an employee? I know I was.
No, I'm not familiar with that at all.
We got lots of people that want to get questions answered in line with the purposes of this meeting, so please, direct your questions either to me or to Diana Osterman, please. If you want to ask questions of Consumers Power, a more appropriate time to do...
I'll be here afterward.
Yeah, more appropriate time would be after the meeting, or if they set up a special meeting like this. Yes, sir.
For the young lady, what frequency, what megahertz is the smart meter putting to the smart chips in the appliances and going out over Verizon?
Okay, I would have to ask Consumers which one they're doing, because they're doing this Verizon connection, and that's typically like a 900 megahertz, but what's normally in a home environment is what they're calling a Zigbee radio, which is more like a Wi-Fi radio, but I don't know that they're using Zigbee. I don't know if you're using Zigbee.
Eventually.
So 2.4 gigahertz is what you're using.
2.3 gigs, and that's communication, that's a radio wave.
Right, so it's like a Wi-Fi.
How many watts is that?
The cellular radio is comparable. It's not 4 times what you talk about. It's the same wattage that comes out of the cell phone. The Zigbee is even lower power than that.
How much?
I believe it's about 30 milliwatts. Very tiny.
Yes, sir.
Talk more about how we can take some political action. So, for instance, somebody wants one of these, okay, fine. I don't want one. I don't want my bill going up. I just as soon have the analog meter. And that's if I'm satisfied with that in my house, and that's what I want. So we need to go there to the people. If somebody wants one of these, we'll let them have the thing. But for those of us that don't want it, and I mean don't want it, meaning that we're not going to pay an additional fee, and we're not going to pay somebody to read our meter, and all these other little hooks and nooks and crannies and stuff we're talking about, it's like we need to just concentrate on that. For those of us that don't want it, how do we go ahead and make sure, A, we don't get the thing, and then if we have it, we want the thing torn off the house and put analog back on.
Right. Well, there's certain things you can do as an individual. You can certainly let the company know that you don't want it. Mr. McKee has stated that there's a number you can call and if you request it, they will take the smart meter off your house. That is what I understood him to say. Now, beyond that, if you, I mean, that's now, but once they pass, once the Public Service Commission passes, enacts an opt-out program, there may be a fee associated with getting that meter off your house. In other words, once the program goes into effect, sometime next summer, if you are refusing a smart meter and you still have your analog meter, they're going to start charging you, you know, like $12 a month or whatever the amount is.
Well, that's what we want to try to stop.
Okay, for that you need political action, and that's where I would suggest you get together with some other folks here in the Muskegon area, form your own local group, your own chapter or organization of people to combat this. And what you do, once you've got some organization, you've got a bunch of people together, go to your Muskegon City Council and lay it out for them, what the issues are, ask them to pass a resolution. We did this 24 times successfully. You can do it too.
Couldn't they go ahead and pass an ordinance prohibiting consumers?
No, there's a problem with that because state law gives the Michigan Public Service Commission jurisdiction. Actually, there might be a way. There is a case decided by the Michigan Supreme Court called Detroit Edison versus the City of Wixom. And this goes.
Edison versus City of Wixom?
Yeah, and that case established that a city can pass an ordinance to impose some restrictions on what a utility can do if the restrictions are reasonable and if they are not retroactive. In that particular case, they wanted Detroit Edison not to put up towers that were 130 foot tall. They wanted to limit them to 100-foot tower for aesthetic reasons or whatever. The city of Wixom lost that case because Detroit Edison had already invested the money in buying or building the taller towers, and to enforce that would have been retroactive. What the Supreme Court said was that they were going to side with the utility, but only because it was retroactive. Had it not been retroactive, they would have allowed the city to have that ordinance in effect. It would have limited what the utility could do. So I have always maintained for the last year and a half that the cities have that power, but the belief is that only the Public Service Commission can deal with this. That's what they believe. The typical city government, the mayor, the city council, they'll ask the city attorney. The city attorney will say, well, we shouldn't really get into this. You know, it could get sticky. It could be involved in expensive litigation. We don't want to go there. Let the Michigan Public Service Commission handle it. That's the bottom line. Yes, ma'am, back of the room.
What about the argument that all of us really have been paying for the meter readers all these years? And because I want to keep my analog, which I would like to direct to you, do you have an analog that is digital?
Yep.
Okay. Because I did have a smart meter on and they replaced it with a digital. Yep. But I didn't want to believe that it was actually analog. But anyway, with all of us paying right now for meter readers, and then for me to keep my analog, you're going to charge me to keep that. Do all the smart meter people get reimbursed a credit for not having a meter reader? And not to mention, we're all unemployed and are added to our unemployment rate.
Yeah, that's right.
Ma'am?
Okay, last summer, unbeknownst to us, when we were not home, somebody came out and put a digital up. And I was upset, and I called the consumers, and I got laughed at, and they were not helpful. I called your number, and they didn't help me, and then they said, oh, no, that's just a digital. Well, I got a meter. I got a little EMF meter that tells me what kind of waves are coming through my wall in my bathroom when I sit on this stool every day.
Ma'am, is there an FCC license number on it?
No.
Okay, well, let me clarify something. There are different kinds of digital meters. The oldest type of digital meter is actually electromechanical, and it has counters on it that look something like the odometer in a car. That's an electromechanical analog meter. Even though the display looks digital, It's really analog, it's really mechanical.
It's still coming through my
Okay,
bathroom
but I
wall.
don't think that's what you got from what you said. Then there is a digital meter that is electronic, that has an illuminated electronic digits on it. Okay, there's that, and it may or may not be a smart meter. And one way to tell is to look for an FCC label on the front of the meter.
There was not one.
Okay, if there's no FCC label, it is probably not doing radio transmissions.
No, I got this little meter. It's
You got a meter that
same
says
thing.
it is?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Same thing, if I go up to the microwave, I get the same kind of thing, only right through my bathroom wall.
okay. Well, then maybe you should complain and have it taken off. Next, ma'am?
Is that what we're getting them replaced with? Like we have a smart meter and I want it off there, so I'm gonna get a digital analog?
That's correct.
Okay, and the process is just to call and tell them that you want it removed?
You can call that number in the brochure.
Okay, and there's a fee to get it
Yeah,
removed?
eventually there will be a fee. The fee for us as, do you mind if do you want me to address this?
No, not right now. I think, but I do want to ask you this.
Yeah, there will be a fee.
I do want to ask you this, Mr. McKay. I understood your company's policy was that people could keep their analog meter or get an analog meter back. Are you now saying that by analog meter you mean an electronic analog meter?
It's my understanding, and maybe Ken, you can correct me, but I believe that digital meters is what people will have in the future. I'm not sure how long, because this is a 7-year program. I'm not sure how long somebody will be able to hold on to a spinning disc analog meter.
That's the kind of analog meter we're talking about, because to our knowledge, that traditional analog meter with the spinning disc and the clock dial, it's the only meter on the horizon right now, or that seems to be on the market, that protects people from both radiation and privacy intrusion. It does both of those things. Now, in theory, the industry should be able to develop an electronic meter with a digital display that doesn't invade your privacy, doesn't transmit radio waves, and doesn't create dirty electricity. We do not see such a meter on the market today. Therefore, in terms of what's available today, we think the only answer is the traditional analog meter with the slow turning wheel and the clock towers. Next question. Yes, sir.
Yes, 2 questions. First of all, what was the basis for the lawsuit that Detroit Edison placed against the people? What was their basis of their lawsuit?
Okay. Was there a second part?
That's the first one. The other one's
You want me to do that first? Okay.
Sure.
The basis is this. There is a regulation on the books, and basically it's been on the books